Acharan prayers and the invocation verse for the Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha. Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Dalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine He Krishna Karuna Sindho Deenabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I'll share my screen. Please let me know if you can see this PowerPoint.
Yes, Prabhu, we can see it, Prabhu.
You can still see it?
Yes, Prabhu. Yeah.
Okay, let's recite the invocation verse. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nandagopakumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. So today's verse is 1.8.50. So let's recite the verse. Naino Ragyah Praja Bhartur Dharma Yuddhe Vidho Dvisham Iti Mena Tu Bodhaya Kalpate Shasanam Vachaha. I'll repeat a couple of more times and then devotees can try to repeat. Naino Ragyah Praja Bhartur Dharma Yuddhe Vidho Dvisham Iti Mena Tu Bodhaya Kalpate Shasanam Vachaha. Naino Ragyah Praja Bhartur Dharma Yuddhe Vadho Dvisham Iti Mena Tu Bodhaya Kalpate Shasanam Vachaha.
Naino Rakyah Prajabhartur Dharma Yuddhe Vadhodusam Time Natu Bodhaya Kalpate Shasanam Vachaha.
Naino Rajna Prajapatur Dharma Yutte Vado Dvisham Iti Menatu Bodhaya Kalpadeshasana Vacham.
Thank you, Mataji.
Naino Rajna Prajabhatur Dharma Yude Vadodvisam iti meta natu bodhaya kalpate shasanan pachaha.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Anyone else?
Naino raja praja bharto dharma yuddhe vado dvisham ite menatu bodhaya kalpate shashanam vacha.
Thank you, Mataji. Okay, anyone else? Okay, then we'll go to the word by word translation. Na, never, ena, since, rajnyaha, of the king, prajabhartu, of one who is engaged in the maintenance of citizens, dharma, for the right cause, yuddhe, in the fight, vadaha, killing, dvisham, of the enemies, iti, all these, me, for me, na, never, tu, but, bodhaya, for satisfaction, kalpate, they are meant for administration, shashanam, injunction, vachaha, words of. Translation. There is no sin for a king who kills for the right cause, who is engaged in maintaining his citizens. But this injunction is not applicable to me. So we'll read the purport by His Divine Grace, Abhay Charanarvind, Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Maharaj Yudhishthir thought that although he was not actually involved in the administration of the kingdom, which was being carried on well by Duryodhana without harm to the citizens, he caused the killing of so many living beings only for his personal gain of the kingdom from the hands of Duryodhana. The killing was committed not in the course of administration, but for the sake of self-aggrandizement, and as such, he thought himself responsible for all the sins. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, in this overall section of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Maharaj Yudhishthir is lamenting after the war that he's thinking he is the cause of the war, and the war also was unjustly waged by the Pandavas to gain a kingdom. So his situation is very similar to the situation of Arjuna before the war, as we know from the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, where Arjuna is lamenting to Lord Krishna, saying, why should we fight this war and kill so many people? And I would rather not fight the war, and what will we gain? Only a kingdom, etc. So Arjuna was thinking, and just like Maharaj Yudhishthir here, they were thinking both of their materialistic conception of life. They were both thinking at a material level, and at a here we see Yudhishthir Maharaj is thinking at a political level that, okay, the citizens were being governed nicely. Well, as the citizens, so the king. So they were being the citizens were okay with Duryodhan because the citizens uh, uh, levels of morality had also dropped as the Kali Yuga was beginning to, or was about to be, was about to commence. So, but still Maharaj Yudhishthir was thinking that the citizens were happy and I just waged this war unnecessarily for no reason, to simply for my self-aggrandizement, which means for my own pleasure, for my own motives, my own agenda of ruling the kingdom, instead of for the welfare of the citizens. Arjuna also talks about this exact same thing, saying that if we have this war, then the population will be affected, and then the overall society will degrade, and so on and so forth. So very similar arguments were being made, but from Bhagavad Gita we know that what Lord Krishna said was far, far superior. There is, of course, the matter of justice, but also the matter of Krishna consciousness. That Krishna wanted this justice to be delivered because his dearest devotees, the Pandavas, had been offended by the um, sinful Kauravas, primarily, or led by Duryodhana. And it was a Krishna conscious arrangement. It was an arrangement that was ordained by Lord Krishna, and Arjuna then, after hearing the Bhagavad Gita, went along and fulfilled Krishna's desire. He says, Karishye vachanam tava. I will do as you say. I will fight this war only to please you. So Arjuna's fighting of the war was an act of Krishna consciousness, was an act of offering yad karoshi, yad ashnashi, yad juhoshi, dadashi yat. Whatever he was doing for the pleasure of Krishna. He had to fight because he was a Kshatriya, but he fought exclusively or only for the pleasure of Lord Krishna, not for any self-aggrandizement, as is written here, or for gaining the victory of the kingdom or any such thing. So that was the consciousness. So here we will see later, Lord Krishna actually leads Yudhishthir Maharaj to another great personality, which we will cover in the next chapter, which is Bhishma Dev, for him to receive instructions from Bhishma Dev about how this war was justified. And Bhishma Dev also includes the divine aspect, that it's the divine will of the Lord and nothing can be changed, that is already in the plan of the Lord, etc. So he gives such instructions to Yudhishthir Maharaj. So this whole concept is that we are thinking at a bodily level, at a nationalistic level, at a political level, and but we don't think at a Krishna conscious level. And the idea is that we should rise above these bodily conceptions of life and think at a Krishna conscious level, think at the level of what will please Krishna, what will please Guru, and then do those things instead of trying to think what will give me personal satisfaction based on our mental frame of what is good and what is bad. That is the essence of this this discussion that is occurring, or the turmoil that is going on in the mind of Yudhishthir Maharaj, and the clarifications that he will get through Bhishma Dev, as very expertly led by Lord Krishna. So that is what I wanted to say about this verse. And as I was thinking about this, I saw a very nice parallel between the thinking that Srila Prabhupada, our dearmost wonderful founder Acharya of the International Society of Krishna Consciousness, had with in his thinking before he joined Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj's movement. And I was thinking that I could speak a little bit on that as well. So yesterday was the divine disappearance day of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Maharaj was, or is still, I mean, but I'm talking in terms of the bodily level, was the spiritual master when he was present on the planet of Srila Prabhupada. And yesterday, on the 2nd of January, according to the Vedic calendar, was his 84th disappearance day. He disappeared on the 1st of January of 1937. So I thought, let me share a little bit about the meeting of Srila Prabhupada with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and what happened, what kind of discussion happened in that meeting, and then how Srila Prabhupada ultimately completely surrendered to his Guru in Krishna consciousness, and realized how to rise up from the bodily level, from the level of society, from the level of the nation, or even the level of this whole planet, to a level which is Krishna conscious, to the level where one can think that what will please Krishna, what will please Guru is more important than what will please my conception of what is good and bad for myself or my country or my people, or things like that. So I wanted to share that, if that's okay with the devotees. Is that okay?
Absolutely, Prabhuji.
Okay, thank you. So as we know, Srila Prabhupada was born in 1896. Seems like a really long time ago. So around when he was 20 years old, that would be like 1916, there was a big turmoil going on in the world at 1916, and you all might be able to correlate the dates and realize that it was World War I that was going on at that time. And around a little later, 1916 to 1918, Srila Prabhupada was in college, and one of his classmates was none other than Subhash Chandra Bose. I did not know that. I probably read it. I was recently reading from Srila Prabhupada's Lilamrita, and I was trying to gather other sources to read about Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj primarily, because of his disappearance day and because of the vacation time and holidays were there. So I was just reading, and I was pleasantly surprised to realize that he was classmates with Subhash Chandra Bose. And I looked up, and Subhash Chandra Bose was also born around the same time as Srila Prabhupada in 1897, actually. So he was 1 year younger. So that was very nice. But the point was that Srila Prabhupada was becoming more and more heavily influenced by Subhash Chandra Bose. As we know, Subhash Chandra Bose was a firebrand in the Indian independence movement and was a great leader of the independence movement. And of course, later on, Mahatma Gandhi came into the scene, and then he took over sort of the independence movement purely from a non-violence standpoint. And Mahatma Gandhi became very popular in India as the leader of the independence movement, primarily because he was basing it. He was combining the spiritual beliefs that are very strong among the Indian people. He combined the spiritual aspects along with his political movement of independence from the British Raj, and through the aspect of non-violence and all, he became very, very, very popular, and the movement became very strong. And as we all know, it led to Indian independence several years. It still took a lot of years and led to the independence movement in 1947, but that's a long ways ago. So in 1920, Srila Prabhupada was, by that time, he was a strong Gandhian. He had, as a protest, all his classmates refused to take the degree as part of the graduation from the college, and he too did that. He started wearing khadi, and he was basically a very strong follower of Mahatma Gandhi. And at that time, he had a friend whose name was Narendranath Malik. And Narendranath and Srila Prabhupada, by the way, I should have said this earlier, had a very, very Vaishnava upbringing by his father, Gaur Mohan Dey. And he was very Krishna conscious right from his childhood. So the principles of the Vaishnava philosophy of bhakti were ingrained in him right from his childhood. But as he was in college, due to his association with so many people like Subhash Chandra Bose and many other people, he became very strongly attached to the movement of Mahatma Gandhi, the independence movement. So, and also from the spiritual side, he had met a lot of fake sadhus who would smoke ganja or some kind of a I don't know what's the right word, a narcotic or whatever, that local form of that, of marijuana. And these sadhus were fake people. He said even there was a person living next to his home. In the morning he was a factory worker, and in the evening he would change his clothes into a saffron clothes and go out like a sadhu begging, as if the people wouldn't realize that he's actually a factory worker. So he had seen too many of these fake sadhus. And this Narendranath Malik one time suggested to Srila Prabhupada, you have very good spiritual beliefs. Let me take you to meet a sadhu. And Srila Prabhupada had absolutely no desire or no plan to meet any kind of sadhu. So, but this friend was very insistent. He almost dragged Srila Prabhupada through the streets to meet the sadhu, and Srila Prabhupada was very, very reluctant, and but ultimately could not resist his friend, and they reached this place where he was, this Narendranath Malik was well known to the people there, so they immediately led him upstairs to meet the sadhu. There was no waiting time or anything like that. They were immediately led upstairs. And this sadhu is none other than Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So this is the picture, a hand-drawn picture, like an artist's picture, not a real photo, of Srila Prabhupada. You can see here sitting on the right-hand side in the front, and next to him is Narendranath Malik. And towards the back, we can see His Divine Grace, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj, sitting there and talking. So it was an evening time, and there was no class as such going on, but he was just talking to his disciples and other guests. And as soon as Srila Prabhupada reached upstairs, and he was immediately struck by the vision of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, by the way, there are so many accounts of people who had heard about him, but when they actually saw him, the glow that is coming out from his body, they were immediately wonderstruck by seeing that glowing sannyasi. And Srila Prabhupada's experience, as written in Srila Prabhupada's Lilamrita by Satswarup Das Goswami Maharaj, is also saying the same thing, that Srila Prabhupada saw that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was sitting with a straight back. He was very thin with long arms, fair complexion, wore round glasses with a round frame, a Vaishnava tilak, and a sannyasa dress with a garland, and he was immediately, he could see that this sadhu is a little different, doesn't seem fake. But still he was, he immediately bowed down. He and his friend both bowed down to pay obeisances. And a wonderful thing happened, so as I have written here in the bottom, while the two young men were still rising after paying their obeisances, two young men means Srila Prabhupada and Narendranath Malik, and preparing to sit, before they had actually sat down, before any preliminary formalities of conversation had begun, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta immediately said to both of them, "You are young, educated men. Why don't you preach Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's message throughout the entire world?" And Abhay is, this is how I have copied it from the Lilamrita. Abhay could hardly believe what he had just heard. Abhay is the name of Srila Prabhupada when his name was Abhay Charan De. And so Abhay could hardly believe what he had just heard. They had not even exchanged views, or they had not even basically, gained eye contact. And yet this sadhu was telling them what they should do. This is like, he was completely like shocked. What is going on here? But this is the power of a sadhu. This is a power of a divine Vaishnava. He directly, unabashedly speaks the message of God. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was the most elevated, the most the most well-known, the most, I don't even have words, the most wonderful, the most acclaimed, the giant of Vaishnava philosophy, sannyasi at that time. And of course, he spoke those words to Srila Prabhupada. So in that first meeting in 1922, Srila Prabhupada already got his instructions for his mission that would define his future life. And Srila Prabhupada was immediately impressed. He felt completely being won over by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj's strength of conviction. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj did not care for anything else other than spreading the message of Lord Chaitanya. He didn't care for any pleasantries. He didn't care for any material concerns. Let these people sit. Let me slowly find out their mood, their attitude, whether they are favorable, unfavorable, this, that, nothing. And of course, he had divine vision, divine empowerment by Krishna. So he could see through the heart of Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada in his life later on also saw many, many, many people. Directly, he knew that these people will be great stalwarts in the movement, and he would simply just recruit them, like, okay, you go do this. And the people are like, ordinary people walking around. They say, what, why are you talking to me like that? And a few years later, they find themselves doing wonderful things in the Hare Krishna movement. This is how pure Vaishnavas enact the will of Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada was completely drawn into Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj. He was very inspired and humbled, and he basically wanted to hear more. He was thinking, yes, I think I'm at the right place. And but still this thing was there in the heart. It seems like a very genuine sadhu, but he wanted to kind of test him. And so during the sometime later in that discussion, the discussion was still going on topics of Lord Chaitanya and all that, and that how important it is to spread the message of Lord Chaitanya. Srila Prabhupada wanted to test Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj. So the disciple tests the master. So Srila Prabhupada asked in a genuine mood, not as a rebuke, not as a argument or in a haughty style, but a very genuine question, but a very strong question. And he asked Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, who will hear your Chaitanya's message? We are a dependent country. First, India must become independent. How can we spread this Indian culture or these teachings of Lord Chaitanya if we are under British rule? That was a big impediment. But answer that Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj gave completely shook Srila Prabhupada to the core. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta replied in a quiet, deep voice, Krishna consciousness does not have to wait for a change in Indian politics, nor it is dependent on who ruled or who rules. Krishna consciousness is so important, so exclusively important, that it cannot wait. So this is the conviction with which Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj spoke, and it completely shook Srila Prabhupada to the core. What is this guy saying? Try to imagine Srila Prabhupada is coming from a Gandhian background. His whole consciousness is about the independence of India. And here this person is saying that whole movement of Mahatma Gandhi and all these other freedom fighters and everything is secondary to this thing called the spiritual advancement of the people and Krishna consciousness and Lord Chaitanya's message. That is more important compared to the big nationalistic movement going on in the minds and hearts of hundreds of millions of people in India at that time. What is he talking about? What on earth is he in a different universe? Doesn't he realize that we have this big movement, Indian independence movement, to take care of? And he's putting that at second priority. this message was too revolutionary for him to fathom in just a few seconds. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta continued to speak that when one power or another ruled, or whether one power or another ruled, was a temporary situation. So this is just like Lord Krishna speaking to Arjuna or to Yudhishthir Maharaj, the mentality to rise up above this bodily conception and rise up to Krishna consciousness. So that is the parallel between this discussion and the one we were having earlier. So whether one power or another ruled was a temporary situation, but the eternal reality is Krishna consciousness. And the real self is the spirit soul. No man-made political system, therefore, could actually help humanity. This was the verdict of the Vedic scriptures and the line of spiritual masters. Although everyone is an eternal servant of God, when one takes himself to be the temporary body and regards the nation of his birth as worshipable, he comes under illusion, because these are material considerations: my body, my nation. The leaders and followers of the world's political movements, including the movement of Swaraj — Swaraj is the Indian independence movement — were simply cultivating this illusion. Real welfare work, whether individual, social, or political, should help prepare a person for his next life and help him re-establish his eternal relationship with the Supreme. So when you get independence in this life, next life you could be born in Africa or another country somewhere where it is not independent. And every life to life, you will just be struggling for independence or doing something, or you'll become a dog who is not independent from his master. And the dog is then going to have to do an independence movement. So what is the point of this independence? And as Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj said, real welfare work — I'll read the last line again — real welfare work, whether individual, social, or political, should help prepare a person for his next life and to help him re-establish his eternal relationship with the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna. So this was the message. This was the message that completely shook Srila Prabhupada to the core. And after hearing this, again, Srila Prabhupada was very torn. And of course, coming from years of Gandhian philosophy and understanding, he was still, battling with this thing that, spiritual life was a luxury that could not be afforded under current conditions. It could only be afforded after, we are out of this British Raj. But in the Lilamrita, it is written, he trusted Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj. He trusted him. This is called faith. Even when the instruction seems, wait, it totally doesn't make sense. But you trust, and then you go forward, and then you realize, aha, it was actually the right instruction. This is the matter of faith. Lord Krishna mentions the matter of faith many times in the Bhagavad Gita, that have faith in what I am saying. In 7.3 and 9.3 are both very strong verses on the topic of faith. And especially in the purport of 9.3 verse, Srila Prabhupada has given a very wonderful discussion on the topic of faith. Please, when you get a chance, read again the purport of Bhagavad Gita 9.3. So, after coming out of the meeting, Srila Prabhupada was totally convinced that this is, first of all, not a fake sadhu. He is a true Vaishnava. Srila Prabhupada was raised as a Vaishnava, and he knew how to detect another Vaishnava. And he realized the truth in Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's words. Of course, Srila Prabhupada had read the Bhagavad Gita by now many times, and he knew the whole concept, but he was not able to apply it on himself. And Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj allowed him, or enabled him, to see the world in that way. And he was completely astounded to hear the philosophy presented. And not only presented, but presented so masterfully, so wonderfully. And this is, There are many acharyas, but the ones like Srila Prabhupada and Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, they explain it so wonderfully that it cuts through the heart and it reaches the core. And that is why so many people took up, they not only heard the message, but they acted on it. That causing the other person to act is the empowerment that the spiritual masters, that the acharyas get from Lord Krishna to present this philosophy so masterfully to the people. And Srila Prabhupada felt his Krishna consciousness being stirred, completely churned from within. And he had never been defeated before in an argument. Srila Prabhupada was very bright, very smart. No one had ever defeated him in an argument, but he was completely defeated, completely by Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj. But he was not sad at this defeat. He was liking this defeat, and this defeat, he didn't consider it as a loss, but he considered it as a huge gain, as a monumental gain. And in that moment, in his heart, he completely surrendered to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. So he became like Arjuna, Shishyaste ham shadhimam tvam prapannam. I am your disciple, in his heart. So Srila Prabhupada recalls, or in the Lilamrita, it's written, it says, I was born from a Vaishnava family, so I could appreciate what he was preaching. Of course, he was speaking to everyone, but he found something in me. And I was convinced about his argument and mode of presentation. I was so much struck with wonder. I could understand, here is the proper person who can give a real religious idea. So you need, first of all, the content need to be real, genuine, which is the philosophy of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Krishna. And you need a proper person to deliver it. And he found that Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj was the absolute proper person to do it. And then he writes, or he recalls, I accepted him as my spiritual master immediately, not officially or externally, but in my heart. And then he also told his friend Narendranath Malik, the message of Lord Chaitanya is in the hands of a very, very expert person. So he was completely flabbergasted, completely in awe of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj. So after that meeting, the first meeting in 1922, he began associating more with the Gaudiya Math devotees. Gaudiya Math is the association that Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj had set up, pretty much like Srila Prabhupada set up ISKCON. It's very similar. And I'll fast forward. Srila Prabhupada moved to Allahabad from Calcutta, and in Allahabad, he kept doing his business of he was trained in chemistry, and he had pharmaceutical businesses, or he had that kind of a material training. So he had set up a business in Allahabad to sustain his family and all that. But he also helped open a temple in Allahabad and began associating with the Gaudiya Math devotees. And over time, his association with the devotees and all kept increasing, and so on. So we will fast forward 10 years from 1922, from the time of that first meeting, to 1932. And this is approximately the time when he has his second meeting with his guru. It's not like these days, where we can see our guru on, Facebook or internet, or even meet, take a flight and, just go from here to wherever, to California or to New York or wherever, Dallas, and see. He had to wait 10 years, but he did not forget his guru in those 10 years. He continued to associate and was completely moved out of the Gandhian philosophy into the Krishna conscious made that the goal of his life. So in 1932, Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj was conducting a Vrajmandal Parikrama. Vrajmandal Parikrama means like a month-long parikrama or a circumambulation of the entire area of Vraja. Even today, a lot of devotees do that, a month-long parikrama of Vrajmandal. All the places in Vraja, includes Vrindavan, Mathura, Varsana, Govardhan, that whole uh, uh, district or area. And Srila Prabhupada joined that parikrama. But he was at that point a nobody, and he didn't. And there were so many disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, and there was a big gathering, and he didn't get any opportunity to associate with Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj at all. But on the last day, it was the last day of the parikrama, and he got an opportunity to associate with Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj. Someone announced that there are two options. You can either sit and listen to a class by Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, or the parikrama is going to some one particular very famous temple. You can go there. And all the people went to the temple. And Srila Prabhupada skipped that trip to the temple and stayed back to hear the message. This shows that Srila Prabhupada prioritized hearing from Guru compared to seeing the deity form of the Lord in the temple. Hearing is the most important. Tat Shrinu, Lord Krishna also says, hearing is the most important activity, and Srila Prabhupada demonstrated that. And out of the hundreds of people in the parikrama, only about 10 to 12 people stayed back to listen to Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj. Everybody else went away. And Srila Prabhupada was listening to Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj with rapt attention. Imagine, this is the Guru, and there was no, also again, no YouTube or no live streaming that you can, wherever your Guru is, you can listen to him anytime you want. You can tune into the channel. All this was not there at that time. There were not even recordings that could be sent offline. There was not even a recorder. There was no concept at all. So this was his, basically, as he was sitting and listening, was his one and only opportunity to hear from his Guru in his heart. And he was hearing like nobody else. He was hearing like there is no tomorrow. Like, these are the last words I will ever hear. With so much rapt attention, he was hearing the message of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. And it's like, take it or lose it. And he was just soaking in every word that Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj was saying. And Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj was like, as if, holding his hand and taking him through a journey. And he was just completely drowned in the nectar of Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj. And Srila Prabhupada recounts that he was completely floored by the conviction, the strength of conviction of Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, and how strongly and how directly he was speaking. And that was his second meeting with his spiritual master. And next morning, Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj left the parikrama, went back to Calcutta from the Vrindavan or the Vraja area, and Srila Prabhupada came back to Allahabad. Now comes the third meeting. So this was the second meeting between Srila Prabhupada and his Guru. The third meeting happened not after 10 years, but after only 1 month. By the way, you all can still hear me? Am I online? And I'm just speaking.
Yes, Prabhu, we can hear you, Prabhu.
Okay, great. Thank you. So the next meeting happened after 1 month, and Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj this time was going to come to Allahabad, and the Gaudiya Math was building a new building, and Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj had been invited to lay the cornerstone of that building. So he was going to come to Allahabad for that reason, and he was going to conduct some initiations as well, give Diksha and conduct the initiation, as in the initiation ceremony, for some of his upcoming disciples or aspiring disciples. And Srila Prabhupada was going to be one of them. So this was decided that Srila Prabhupada would also be initiated by Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj. And Srila Prabhupada recalls thinking that, I have already accepted him as my spiritual master in my heart. I have already received the orders from the spiritual master of what to do. So what else is left? I have accepted him. I have accepted his orders. Now, only thing left is for him to accept me. So if only he can accept me, then everything would be confirmed. Everything would be set. So at the time of the second initiation, at the third meeting in 1932, with folded palms, Abhay, again I'm copying from the Lilamrita language, Abhay looked up humbly at his spiritual master. He and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati were now face to face. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta recognized him, and he recognized him. Of course, there was divine recognition, but he recognized him even from that class 1 month back. So he recognized him and was visibly pleased to see him. And he said, "Yes," he said, exchanging looks with Abhay. "He likes to hear. He does not go away. I have marked him. I will accept him as my disciple." So Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj accepted him as his disciple. And you know what? There was a surprise. So Abhay listened carefully as his spiritual master conducted the initiation. Finally, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj called for Abhay to come forward and receive initiation by accepting his japa, or the japa beads. After offering prostrated obeisances, Abhay extended his right hand and accepted the strand of japa beads from the hand of his spiritual master. And here's the surprise. At the same time, he also received the sacred Brahminical thread, signifying second initiation. So in the Vaishnava philosophy, there are 2 levels of initiation. One is known as the Harinam initiation, where you formally get accepted by the Guru as a disciple. You get a spiritual name, you get a set of beads that the Guru has chanted on, and they become your sort of official beads that you would do japa on. And that's basically your acceptance into the disciplic succession. But after that, the spiritual master looks at the disciple for some time and watches his conduct, his her acharana, their basically their behavior and their spiritual progress and so on, and then awards Brahminical initiation when you get a thread that you wear on your body. So that happens usually after many years after the first initiation. And in his case, Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj awarded him the second initiation also right away, because he found, of course, Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj knew at a divine level who this person is going to be, but it just shows that how much he was convinced about Srila Prabhupada's. Already he was like a ripe fruit, and ready to distribute the nectar to the rest of the world. So he was given the name Abhay Charana Ravinda. His name was Abhay Charan, and Aravinda, or the lotus flower, was added. Abhay Charana Ravinda was his new name. And after the initiation was over, Srila Prabhupada began to think even more seriously of how to execute the order of his spiritual master, of how to propagate the message of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So we will, so this was his third meeting. So remember, first meeting was in 1922, when he was dumbfounded when he met him, and when he said, "You two should," with Narendranath Malik. The second meeting was in the Vrajmandal Parikrama, and the third meeting was during the initiation. And then later on, after this, Krishna started taking things in his own hands. So Krishna then, made Srila Prabhupada's business kind of go bust in Allahabad. Srila Prabhupada then, was still not completely ready to give up everything and, become a sannyasi. He had family responsibilities and so on. So he was not just being irresponsible to leave everything and like that. So he basically moved to Bombay to reestablish his new business or something like that. And when he was in Bombay, he also established a Gaudiya Math branch over there. So constantly he was involved in helping move forward the mission of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. So in 1930, we'll fast forward another 2 years. In 1935, there was a Vyasa Puja celebration occurring by the disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj. Vyasa Puja means the disciples get together and celebrate the birthday, the appearance day of the Guru. That is known as Vyasa Puja. And the Guru does not have to be physically there. The disciples can just get together and celebrate. So that's what happened. Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj was not there physically, but the disciples got together. And on that occasion, Srila Prabhupada wrote a poem, a poetry to glorify his Guru, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj. And he also wrote a long article or an essay glorifying him. And he read that poem and the essay to the group of devotees that were present. And maybe the others did similar things, but everyone was very impressed by his poetry, by his essay, very much. And the word reached somehow or the other, the word reached Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj. And a copy of his poetry and his essay also reached him. And it's said that Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, when he read that poem, he was very, very, very pleased. And there's this one stanza in the poem that he was particularly very pleased with, and he showed that poem to everybody around him. And this stanza says, Absolute is sentient. Sentient means personal, has feelings. So this is the personalist philosophy, not the impersonal. The Absolute is sentient, thou hast proved. Impersonal calamity, thou hast removed. So Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, of course, was preaching Lord Chaitanya's philosophy of personal, the Bhagavan conception, not the Mayavad conception. He was actually dispelling, removing the Mayavad misconception. So that's what is this paragraph. Absolute is sentient, thou hast proved. Impersonal calamity, thou hast removed. So Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj was very, very pleased with Srila Prabhupada's writing. To such an extent he was pleased that he said, Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj used to publish a magazine called The Harmonist. And he told the producer, one of his disciples, whatever he writes, publish it. He was just, he knew this man, Abhay Charanarvind, is no ordinary man. He will do great things in the future. So he was so impressed by Srila Prabhupada's writing. In interest of time, I'm not going to be able to read the other wonderful things on the slide, but the Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj was amazing, was amazingly pleased by Srila Prabhupada. Then again, we come to the fourth meeting. In the meantime, the businesses in Bombay also started, taking reversals, and he lost his business once again. And when that happened, his desire to fulfill the orders of his spiritual master increased even more. So this is again another indication or a symptom of a true devotee. Whenever life reversals occur, they turn to Krishna rather than turning away from Krishna. They turn towards Guru rather than away from him. So his desire to become more involved in Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj's mission became even stronger. Then the fourth meeting and the final meeting occurred between Srila Prabhupada and Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj. We'll fast forward to November 1935. And if you remember, Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj left this planet on January 1937, January 1st. So this is basically November 35 is about 1 year before his disappearance. And Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj was in Vrindavan once again for 1 month. And he was staying at Radhakund and in the Govardhan area. And Srila Prabhupada arrived with his son from Bombay. And at that time, there was some quarrel going on among the disciples of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. They were quarreling about very petty things as to, who will occupy this room, who will occupy that room. In the due to the success of Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj's movement, they had made a big temple and a big headquarters of the Gaudiya Mutt in Calcutta, in downtown Calcutta, Bagh Bazaar. It's one of the central places, not in the outskirts or some very expensive and central location. A headquarters was built with a lot of money put in, and all his disciples were fighting about, oh, I will take this room, I will take that room, like very materialistic tendencies. And Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj was very disturbed, almost disgusted with this kind of a mentality. So he was very troubled with that, and in that mood, that was his mood, Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj's mood. Prabhupada didn't know anything like this is going on. He was living in Bombay, not in Calcutta, and so he didn't know any such things going on. So at one time, Srila Prabhupada, you can see here with his son, he got an opportunity to talk to Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj in private. And Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj shared his heart confidentially to Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj said, and some very grave words he said that Brahmanas and Vaishnavas were supposed to be free from envy of any creature. What to speak of the envy of one another? You're supposed to be free of envy from each other. If they were to fight now, what would they do after the spiritual master has passed away? In the presence of the spiritual master, they are fighting. And Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj said, but my followers became contaminated with a little wealth and desire for prestige. This is such a shame. And Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj was very, very disappointed, very disheartened with this. And he says, in the name of religion, they became attached to ease, position, and prestige. It could only mean that they have failed to grasp the teachings of their spiritual master. This is spiritual master saying this. And those disciples, were fighting on these petty things. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj was so distressed by this kind of behavior of some of his disciples. Not all, some of them. So Srila Prabhupada recalls, I did not, or I heard, but I did not know what to make of it. He was completely surprised, but Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj was revealing his heart to Srila Prabhupada. And he was lamenting that these men are simply after the stones and bricks of the building. Srila Prabhupada writes, he was about Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, that he was very, very sorry. He was very disappointed. Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj said, when we were living in a rented house, if we could collect 200 or 300 rupees, we were living very nicely. We were very happy then. But since we have been given this marble place in Bagh Bazaar, there is friction between our men. Who will occupy this room? Who will occupy that room? Who will be the proprietor of this room? Everyone is planning in different ways. It would be better to take the marble from the walls and secure the money. He said, let's break the marble. Let's sell the marble back and get the money. He said, if I could do this and print books and distribute books, that would be better. How disheartened Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj was, how disgusted he was. He said, let me just break down this temple or this headquarters, sell the marble, and instead with that money print books and distribute the books. And that was the final instruction, not the final instruction, but the most important instruction that he gave to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, I had the desire to print some books. If ever you get any money, print books. This was the instruction of Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj. And we all know how seriously Srila Prabhupada took that instruction of printing books. Until today, that whole instruction is being carried out, not only by Srila Prabhupada, but thousands and thousands of his disciples and grand disciples. And so much book distribution is going on. And Srila Prabhupada so wonderfully fulfilled that instruction. If you ever get money, print books. Standing by Radha Kund and beholding his spiritual master, Abhay felt the words deeply enter his own life. If you ever get money, print books. Then fast forward one more year. So this was in November of 1935. And in December of 1936, he received his final instructions. Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj was in poor health at Jagannath Puri, and Abhay was in Bombay. And he wanted to serve his Guru Maharaj. So he wrote to him a letter. It says, "Dear Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances at your lotus feet. You have got many disciples, and I am one of them, but they are doing direct service to you." So he's talking about those that were serving Maharaj personally in Jagannath Puri. "Some of them are brahmacharis, some of them are sannyasis, but I am a householder. I cannot. Sometimes I give monetary help while I cannot give you direct service. Is there any particular service I can do?" So this is the most important question any disciple can ask a spiritual master. What can I do to please you? Is there any service I can do? So disciple is always looking a way to serve the Guru. And 2 weeks later, Abhay received a reply. And the reply said, "I am fully confident that you can explain in English our thoughts and arguments to the people who are not conversant with that language of the other members. This will do much good to yourself as well as to your audience. I have every hope that you can turn yourself into a very good English preacher if you serve the mission to inculcate the novel impression of Lord Chaitanya's teachings in the people in general, as well as philosophers and religionists." So basically the instruction was the same as he got in his first meeting. The same thing, go out and preach in the English language to the world. So Srila Prabhupada recalls, "I at once recognized this to be the same instruction I had received at the first meeting in 1922. I took it as a confirmation. There was now no doubt as to the purpose of my life. What my spiritual master had said in Calcutta in 1922 had not been a chance remark, nor had that been a chance meeting. The instruction was the same. Turn yourself into a very good English preacher. This will do much good to yourself as well as to your audience." And a few days later, His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada, entered into the eternal pastimes of Sri Sri Radha and Krishna. So, and then over the next 40 years, Srila Prabhupada, his greatest and most wonderful disciple, would give his life and soul to please his spiritual master. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Thank you very much. That's all I wanted to say. Sorry for going over a few minutes. Hare Krishna.